Welcome back for our second day of business days at the Capitol and our breakfast. I hope everyone enjoyed the Lawmaker Appreciation Reception hosted by Navajo Transitional Energy Company. And yeah, it was a very nice one. Thank you. And as we start this morning, let's acknowledge our bronze sponsors: Blackfoot Communication, Bozeman Area Chamber of Commerce, MDO Resources, Montana Electric Co-op Association, PAR Montana, Reach Higher Montana, and 0 to 5. Thank you to all of our sponsors that made this possible. Non-legislative session years are a great time to plan, and we have the interim committees. The work never stops. Here this morning to give an update on the interim priorities is Sheridan, who is stepping in today for Charles Robison, whose voice isn't in, but Sheridan's gonna kill this, and so I will turn this over to her.
Great. Thank you, Nancy. As she mentioned, I'm Sheridan Johnson, Government Relations Specialist here at the Chamber, and Charles has a bit of a voice, but he didn't want to lose it halfway through sitting up here. So we are adjusting. Last spring, the Montana Chamber wrapped up our third regular legislative session under the guidance of our 10-year strategic plan, Envision 2026. Through legislative and private sector initiatives, the Chamber is focused on making measurable progress in 4 critical areas: workforce development, the business climate, infrastructure investment, and entrepreneurial sustainability. We look forward to continuing our work with lawmakers to advance this plan as we cross its halfway point. With that, I welcome you to our long-standing Eggs and Issues breakfast, when we get the opportunity to hear from Montana's legislative leadership. I'm honored to be up here with these panelists who, along with their legislative colleagues, put their normal lives on hold last year to serve in Montana's 68th legislative session. I'm pleased that we have with us Senate President Pro Tem Ken Bogner, who has served in the Senate since 2019, representing Miles City, where he grew up. He served 4 years in the Marine Corps, including 2 combat tours in Iraq. And in case you missed it, Senator Bogner formally announced Tuesday that he is running for Congress in the Eastern District. Thank you for making time in your busy schedule to join us today. I am also joined by Senate Minority Whip Shannon O'Brien, who is stepping in for Senate Minority Leader Pat Flowers, who was called in sick today. She has represented Missoula since 2021. Senator O'Brien is an educator with a background that spans K-12 to the Bullock administration to serving as Dean of Missoula College. She is also a candidate for Superintendent of Public Instruction. Also with us this morning is House Minority Leader Kim Abbott. After a lengthy career in the nonprofit sector, including many years as co-director of the Montana Human Rights Network, Representative Abbott does policy research and consulting. She's represented Helena in the State House since 2017. Representative Brandon Lear is also joining us on behalf of the House Republican Caucus. Representative Lear is one of the majority whips on the House Republican leadership team. He represents House District 35 in and around Sydney. He's a rancher and has served in the House since 2021. At the request of the Montana Chamber, Representative Lear sponsored House Bill 410 to shorten the time limit for serving a lawsuit. House Bill 410 was part of the Chamber's agenda to level the playing field and make business litigation more predictable. Please help me welcome our legislative leadership and thank them for all of the work they do for Montana. We've asked the panelists to share some opening remarks before we turn it over to questions for attendees, so make sure you have those prepared. We ask that they give us a look back at the 2023 session, including successes, missed opportunities, etc., to address issues that impact business and economic development. We also ask them to share their aspirations for themselves and advice for colleagues in 2025. We'll start with Senator Bogner, then Senator O'Brien, Rep. Abbott, and close with Representative Lear. After their opening remarks, we'll take questions from the floor. Charles and Matt will have roaming microphones, so we don't have Carrie trying to entertain us on his walk across the room today. Senator Bogner, the floor is yours.
All right, can you hear me? Okay, good morning. I'm Ken Bogner. I'm the state senator for a majority of southeast Montana, including my hometown of Miles City. As mentioned, I'm the president pro tem. So was asked to take the spot of the president today and had to really think back. A year feels like a long time with all that's gone on. And I was thinking just how different this session felt than the previous session in 2021. In 2021 was our COVID session. There wasn't a lot of people in the building, just a different atmosphere. This session, everyone was back. We had more bills introduced this session than had been introduced since the last constitutional convention. So very busy, very active. Over on the Senate, our caucus, Republican caucus, was very proud of the work we did in the legislature as a whole. There was 2 issues this session that were frankly historic. It had to do with taxes and with housing. We had over $1 billion in tax relief. We sent money back to the people, both in income tax rebates and property tax rebates. We cut the individual income tax rate. We cut the business equipment tax, which we're trying to get that to 0. Very proud of that. On top of that, we sent money not just back to the people, but back to the local governments to help with wastewater, water, infrastructure, roads. Sent money to towns and counties to help with our potholes. Very proud of that. On the housing side, we passed multiple pieces of legislation, groundbreaking pieces of legislation that other states have spent years trying to pass, and we did it all in one session. They're calling it the Montana Miracle. So we're very proud of those 2 things. There's many other things that we can talk about when we get into. Trying to think of missed opportunities was a little tough because in the moment we felt like we were tackling all the issues that were facing Montana. That was a year ago. Some other issues have come up, but we felt really good about where we were and going into next session where we're at. Some things, me personally, that I see us really working on next session is workforce development. We have issues related to getting people here in the state that can work, and the ones that are here that want to work to be able to stay and have their housing needs met and just growing. Montana's growing, so we want to make sure that our people here now are able to participate in that. So happy to go into more details as we move along.
I'm not too particular about the order if you just want to go down the line, or Senator O'Brien, whatever you prefer.
Sure. Hi, everyone. It's nice to be back, and thanks for having me. I live down the street and represent Helena, Central Helena, the capital area, and have served as minority leader in the House, both this last session and the session before it. And I guess you'll be surprised to hear I have a slightly different assessment of the session than Ken. For folks that were here last year, our caucuses, Shannon and mine, came in and we passed out our agenda. And we felt that our agenda absolutely addressed what we were hearing from the business community, from Montana families, from the workforce. We wanted to address infrastructure needs, housing. We wanted to shore up the healthcare system. We had a lot of policies. And Shannon, I'll let you take the lead on property tax because you carried one of our signature pieces of legislation that got no bipartisan support, but would have taken care of some of the complaints that we're hearing right now from a lot of people all over the state on rising property taxes. And the reason that we were able to come in with an agenda like that is that we were out knocking on doors, working hard, and we were listening to businesses, local government, and Montana families about what was necessary. And I'm very, very proud of the policy agenda that we moved last session. We had some victories. We made a major investment in access to childcare, which all of you know is one of the major barriers for maintaining your workforce in your communities is access to childcare. There are childcare deserts all over the state. We fixed some of the unpredictability for the business providers of childcare with Representative Buckley 648. We also reversed a cut that the administration let go through after the COVID relief ended. And so we're really proud of that. It took a lot of work. It took bipartisan support. And, I say this this is my 4th time up here for this, and I do enjoy it, despite the fact that I complain to Charles every year about the time. It's 8 a.m., I don't know if you know. I'm not farm strong like this guy. I don't get up this early most of the time. But I like coming here. I like being able to communicate what the Democratic Caucus is doing in terms of listening to y'all and trying to deliver for you. I think I'm surprised every time I hear the administration. I will say I'm surprised every time I hear the administration talk about the historic tax relief because all I hear are complaints when I'm out and about what we didn't do in terms of taxes. I think we'll talk about solutions as we get back into things. But the last thing I'll say is provider rates for Medicaid was one of the biggest things we heard from rural communities. Hospitals were closing, hospitals weren't closing. I'm sorry, Jesse. They weren't closing. They were in threat of closing, but nursing homes were. We heard that over and over again. And Mary Cafaro, our Vice Chair on Appropriations, longtime 20-year legislator, really worked across the aisle and shepherded through a provider rate increase that will shore up those institutions that we need all across our state. So I'm excited to talk to y'all, and thanks for having me back.
Thank you. Representative, am I even pronouncing your last name right? Is it Lear or Lair? Lear, okay, cool. All right, we'll just go down the line.
Thank you. My name is Brandon Lear. I represent House District 35, which encompasses all of Richland County. I think I win the award for the fellow that has to travel the farthest to get here. Between myself and Representative Knutson, we're just kind of a few miles apart. We argue all the time about that. Anyway, thank you for having me here and letting me speak on behalf of the House Republicans. I believe that in the 2023 session, just like Senator Wagner said, we passed some historic legislation for the business community between the tax cuts, business equipment tax, another senator, Senator Fitzpatrick, he carried 525 bills, I'm pretty sure, about half of the legislation, and a lot of them dealt with legal reform, and I was tasked with usually carrying them on the House floor, and I am the farthest thing from a lawyer, so I had fun doing that. Anyway, other things that I think that we need to work on is for next session we're going to have Medicaid expansion, which is going to be huge. Property tax will obviously be a big issue in the 2025 session. Other things I think that are going to need to be worked on, like Representative Wagner said, keep working on the business equipment tax. That's a huge issue in the state of Montana. I know over the last 2 sessions we've done some really good work on it and made major strides in that. I'm also one of the legislative liaisons for Montana State Fund, and I believe that obviously in the business world, that's a huge factor, and I think that in the future, they're doing good work now, and I think that there'll be more to come. I think every year they're getting better and better, and our rates are getting better and better, which saves us money. So I guess that's what I have. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Shannon O'Brien, and I am a state senator, and it's truly an honor to be here. I first want to thank Todd and Nancy for all you do, and all of your folks who throw a great party last night and a nice breakfast this morning. And I think that we've got Paul Green in the house, and I just wanted to congratulate Paul on our director, on his new assignment, and I think that there is great potential in working with the Department of Commerce and the legislature and the chamber and individual businesses that we can elevate private industry to, we're talking about prosperity. We're looking for ways for our Montanans, our future Montanans and our current Montanans to experience prosperity. And I think that's what we all want. I would like to, I was thinking about this, and it's like, I don't want to start with an apology, but in many ways I feel like as a legislature, as a legislative body, we could do better for you. And I'm hopeful that the next legislative session we will do better. What I have been hearing since the end of the session and during the session, I've been hearing most about property taxes. And education is my background, and that's where I feel like, education is the panacea. If we can get our children well educated, then we'll have a great future for medicine and healthcare, and we'll have a great future in business, and we'll have a great future everywhere. But what I've been hearing more and more and more is that the legislative efforts to solve the tax situation in Montana, we did pass a phenomenal number of bills to alleviate taxes, we didn't do it the right way. And so now there's this backlash of property taxes that have just been skyrocketing for multiple reasons. So that's been a challenge for us, and that's our hope for the future for next legislative session is let's roll up our sleeves and get to work there. That's a major problem. Some of the collaborative wins I saw, and I have a bias. I'll share that with you right now, and I think we all do. We all have a reality that's our own, but in the child care realm and in the early learning realm, we had some major victories, and we all set aside our differences for the sake of the children and the sake of the workers in Montana. I think people saw that all of a sudden we didn't have the workforce we needed. And one of the primary reasons was that people simply were not going back to work. And why weren't they going back to work? Because they couldn't afford childcare. Not only could they not afford childcare, but as you know, not even half of Montanans can find childcare even if they could afford it. So that's an issue we appropriated, and the governor signed $7 million a year to help families get back to work so that they could put their children in childcare. I think we need to focus more on what's going on in rural Montana and with rural businesses. We in order to have a prosperity throughout the state, we need our rural areas to, I'm seeing some nods, we need to focus more there. I think many of us come from some of the larger towns in the state, and if we can focus what we need to start up businesses and what we need to do to support businesses in rural Montana, we'll be much better off, and we'll have prosperity there, we'll have families thriving there, and we'll have strong schools there. The one thing I have to say where we succeeded is when we were able to set our differences aside and focus on solutions. And as you know, if you're in this room, you're successful. It's about relationships. And certainly in the Senate, and I look to Senator Bogner, we build relationships, and we're able to set our differences aside and focus on the solutions. We didn't do that enough, and we need to do that more, and I look forward to doing that more. Aspirations for 2025, I am running for state superintendent of schools. I hope to have that lens and work closely with the legislature to help support that early learning and have children kindergarten ready, but also we have a teacher shortage crisis. We have schools that do not have teachers in classrooms. They're zooming in teachers from out of the country. They're licensed teachers for the state of Montana, but they live out of the country. And so that's a serious issue that affects businesses. People don't want to move to Montana if they don't have good schools. So we've got good schools. We need to support those teachers. Looking forward to it, and thank you very much.
Thank you all. It's really been a pleasure to work with each of you and get to know you. I'm pretty new to this position, but I really appreciate you being here. Thank you again for being here today to talk with Montana's business community. We'll now get started on our questions from the floor, and as we take those questions, we'll make sure to rotate between parties and between chambers to get a variety of opinions, and everyone will have the opportunity to respond to each question as you wish. As we take those questions, please raise your hand so our staff can get to you quickly.
Good morning, and thank you all for being here. I truly appreciate you taking time away from your lives to come to Helena for 4 months every year. One of the things on my mind is somebody from a rural community that you mentioned, being Ringling White Sulphur Springs, is that we celebrated a member of the Montana Chamber, Berg Garage, in October for being a member for 67 years. And it's a mom and pop shop. They support 3 families. And they said that they're a member of the chamber because they don't have time to come to Helena and be that voice. And so we're that voice. We now represent 2,000 members. And so I'm thinking about how do we better let you know who we represent and work with you all better.
Senator O'Brien?
Thank you. That's a great question, and it goes with the relationships. And I actually shared with both you, Nancy, and Todd last night, and I'll share with the rest of you. As legislators, we need to be educated on different perspectives on how a bill. I feel sometimes like Jerry Maguire, the movie Jerry Maguire, help me, help you, help me, help you, get the Quan. And I feel like the chamber, during the legislative session, you have a team that has been taking that approach of educating us so that we're aware of how a bill may actually affect you. And we all have our different realities. My dad was a small business owner. He had a little sporting goods store, and a bill might, like, good intentions, really good intentions. And I think most of the time legislators have good intentions. We just don't fully understand the impact of certain bills. So it's all based on relationships, and the best that you can. What I have been going around the state sharing with folks is become first best friends with your legislators. Get to know who represents you, and then let them make sure they know who you are, and then you have that relationship, and then rely on the chamber to help that conduit, because these folks are paying close attention to every single bill, and we find that helpful to learn how to make bills better, or let's make this work better. But it's a great question. Thank you,
Senator Bogner.
Sure. I have really good relationships with the local chambers in my district. So to me, it's not really an issue of knowing those members because I already have that relationship. For those who don't maybe not have that relationship, I would say it would be helpful if your individual members reached out to their legislators and just introduce themselves, let them know that they're there for any questions is really helpful. That way, when a bill does come up that we may have questions about in a really short time frame going through the legislature, that we can reach out to people in our own community and ask what they think about that, get their opinion, and make a decision. So, as Senator O'Brien said, it's about those relationships. So, reaching out to your local legislator goes a long ways.
Representative Abbott.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I agree that it's that the chamber plays an important role in the building, and I think that the perception can be that the chamber is about big business and sort of centralized larger corporations, and I think I'm guilty of that too, you know. And so I think definitely putting different voices forward for you guys would be helpful for remembering that you guys have a diverse membership, and more diverse than I often think it is. And so that's helpful for me. And I think legislators that are there, we are, you know, we all have different jobs, and we have different expertises, and we don't have staff in general. And so we really do count on experts in the field to hear what the impacts are that we might not know. And, you know, we're all sort of generalists, so it's really, really important to hear from experts.
As a small business owner myself, and we not only farm and ranch, I own a small fencing company. I understand the importance of small business in Montana, and especially small business in rural Montana. And as a legislator, one of the first things I noticed when I come up here is we're just completely inundated with information. And none of us are experts on everything. And we rely heavily on people that we trust and people we know that are knowledgeable in certain industries and certain aspects of this legislative process. And so leaning on the chamber or people back home that we know that are knowledgeable in certain areas is definitely a key for me, because like this session with over 1,000 pieces of legislation drafted, we don't know. I mean, there is no way to process all that information. And with the help of the chamber and many other people, we're able to siphon through that information, know what's good, what's bad, and how it affects people, because there's just no way with that massive amount of information that we could ever process it all. So I guess that would be my answer to that.
Thank you. Next question.
Good morning. My name is Gary Weens. I'm on the Montana Chamber Board, and I'm also with Montana Electric Cooperatives Association. As was mentioned, there's a lot of angst about property taxes. So what solutions do you think the 25 legislature should consider?
Representative Lear, you want to give that one a go? Start us off. Just a light little.
I can go.
There you go.
Senate bailing out the House again. No, I'm just kidding. There was one piece of legislation that I really liked that was introduced this session. It's been passed in Colorado, and that's TABOR, Taxpayer Bill of Rights. And that has a lot to do with sending excess tax dollars back to the people who paid those taxes. We can do that with some property tax. That would go a long ways in making sure that taxpayers who are paying these costs for their property get some of that money back if the state and local governments are in excess of what they had budgeted. I think that's really important. That would help alleviate a lot of these problems if people are getting the money back that they're overpaying for. Yeah.
So I think that for 2025, I mean, I'm not going to be there. I'm going to be like in Arizona, just kicking back and day drinking. Just kidding. But I can tell you that if you go to Colorado, TABOR is an unmitigated disaster for governing. And you would not find support from Democrats for that kind of policy. I think you saw it in the call for a special session recently, and I feel pretty confident that you wouldn't see any support for that again. I'll let Shannon talk about, our sort of, we had a centerpiece policy in our property tax proposals that basically uses the income tax system to ensure that a household's property tax doesn't increase faster than their household income. It takes care of a lot of trouble for folks on fixed incomes, retirees, and folks that are just in industries where their property values are growing faster than their wages. And so I can let Shannon do the hard part of explaining the mechanics of that, but it's a good policy. It exists in a lot of other states, and you wouldn't be hearing the complaints that you're hearing right now had we gotten bipartisan support on that bill.
As Senator Bogner said, TABOR I think would be helpful in this situation, and a trigger bill to give back excess tax dollars. Also, I mean, it comes down to where I think some of these, especially during COVID, a lot of families and businesses were asked to really tighten their belts. And I know that government tightened their belts some, but I think that there's also ways that we can try to cut spending in these certain areas to help lower different budgets, to lower property tax too. And I know a lot of that stems with local government, and so with Tabor, that would definitely help out there.
So, hottest question. Like, this is, if we could solve this one thing in this panel discussion right now with all of y'all, we'd be in good shape, right? And I am on I was vice chair of tax committee. I'm on interim revenue committee right now. We meet in about 2 weeks, and have spent an enormous amount of time here. And to give you the 30,000 foot response is our tax system right now clearly is not working. And no one wants to pay their taxes, right? No one wants to pay, like, the taxes. Okay, let me say that again. Taxes are pain. Taxes are ugly. And if government is doing its job, we have figured out a fair tax system, and fair is that critical word, where government is able to serve and be helpful. Let us be free and have our freedoms and stay out of our business, except when we need government, right? We need law enforcement, we need education, we need health care. There's some basic things that we're going to need. And so we need those things, and government needs that. There's a role for government in that. Now, my sense is, and we can talk about these specific solutions, and certainly there are lots of discussions going on right now about sales tax and Tabor and these specific property tax policies and potential bills that can move the dial. But what we have learned about the tax system is we want it to be fair, and we want it to not change significantly in any 1 year or 2 years or 3 years. So that's why we're hearing all this about property taxes, is because all of a sudden it's just skyrocketed in the last couple of years. And it's like, okay, people are willing to pay their fair share. So I'm not trying to talk kindergarten talk with taxes with you right now, and I'm happy to dive deep into all the different possibilities, but I will share it's very complex, and we want to look at all of the different options and find out what is fair and what allows government to stay away when it doesn't need to be a part of it. And I invite you to come give public testimony or learn more. The Revenue Interim Committee meeting in 2 weeks.
I'd like to add one more thing into this property tax issue, and it's something that has been brought up, especially in my district, is that I see one of the reasons why property tax has risen so much is because we are not developing our natural resources here in the state of Montana like we used to. In one school district, where my kids go to school, is Savage, and we had a coal mine just shut down here about 18 months ago. And in a school district of less than 100 kids, K through 12, that coal mine supported the school by the tune of $100,000. That was 10% of our budget. And you see that across the state. I think that developing our natural resources like we did for, since Montana's been a state, whether that's logging, whether that's coal, I mean, even now with the wind energy and solar energy that's going up, these companies come in and they pay a large sum of property tax, and that money all goes back to the local community. And I think that if we were to develop that more, that we would see our local property tax, especially towards our school system, go down, because them natural resources, and especially in Richland County where we have oil, our property tax, especially towards our schools, has stayed fairly flat. We haven't had to raise, but now that we see that decreasing, and like in Savage to where the coal mine went away, the mills are having to start to come back up. So I think that's one of the key issues in keeping our property tax low, is developing our natural resources.
I'm sure that this is an issue that we've all either felt or heard about, and I cannot thank you enough for being up here today to share your thoughts and for being willing to take time to work through these things. Our next question,
Hello, back
see,
here.
I can't see over the podium. I'm
Thank
too
you.
short for this seat.
Thank you guys for being here this morning. I really appreciate it. You've touched on this a little bit already, mentioned the buzzwords here, but finding and retaining talent is still a challenge for businesses all across the state. What else do you think the legislature can do to help workforce development and talent attraction, aside from things like tax credits or funding for CTE?
Representative Abbott, do you want to get us started?
Yeah, sure. I think everyone in this room knows there's no silver bullet for workforce development, and you need a multi-strategy approach, and it has to address some of those issues that we've already touched on. And I think that we'll start to sound like a broken record, but what we heard in terms of workforce from businesses was like, yes, having skilled employees was an issue, but one of the issues around that was whether those potential employees could find housing that they could count on in the community that they wanted to work in and where the job was, and whether their family could find childcare in those communities. And so I think having a broad approach on what the state can do to invest in those infrastructure pieces, workforce housing, childcare, and of course, career training and education and apprenticeships. I think we had a variety of proposals last session, and I suspect that our caucus will bring a number more next session that really try to invest in those things. And as a government, and we're all part of it, and obviously have a perspective from a specific branch of government, we invest in the things that we think are valuable to our communities and our economy. And whether that includes subsidies for things that, the market just won't support on its own but are essential, we do that. We do that across sectors, and we do that across the state and communities, and we can do that again in terms of housing, childcare, and apprenticeship programs. And I hope that we're willing to make those investments and call them what they are. I think sometimes subsidies get a bad rap, but the bottom line is where we need to intervene, and a lot of times those are in rural places. Where we need to intervene, we should, and we should feel good about it. It's an investment in those communities. It's an investment in our economy.
Whoever would like to.
I believe that with the legislature's work in the last two sessions with the red tape relief, that is going a long way. Also, yes, housing, getting people in, also them being able to afford to live in these areas. Coming from a rural area, affordability for housing is not an issue. It's just getting that group of people, the people that you're after, to stay in your community. And one thing I've heard is, especially in professions that have to be licensed, is making sure that we have, whether that's reciprocity or a license from another state, whether that's a teaching license, whether that's some of that's in the medical field, making sure that when a family comes out of military service, that the field that they've worked in and the license that they've received, are good in the state of Montana, to where they don't need to go back to school and spend more money in a field that they've already become proficient in. And so I think making sure that Montana is aligned to where we're a very easy state and attract the people with these licenses to come in here, and they don't have to do any extra work. Was talking to a fella who's a therapist, and Montana's license, he's retired from the Air Force, and his license doesn't work in the state of Montana, but it does in Colorado. And so his wife moved up here to be a doctor, and we could really use his services, especially in the mental health realm in eastern Montana, to where there isn't a whole lot of them services available. But he can't open up his own business because his license isn't good here, and he would have to go back to school and get these certain credits. And I think alleviating that and streamlining that is a big issue to try to draw some of these professions, people that are professionals, into the state of Montana.
Senator Bogner?
Sure. The two biggest things we'd heard going into this session that were hampering workforce were housing and childcare, as were mentioned. We took steps to address both of those. As I mentioned in my opening, we passed the Montana Miracle. That's going to take some, we really wanted to work on the supply side of housing, and that's going to take a little time for that to kick in. We passed some bills that related to childcare, making sure they couldn't get zoned out of residential areas, that the ratios were expanded a little bit. Those things should help. So as we figure or see the results come in with those, we can make adjustments and continue to work on the housing policy, the childcare policy. What we've also heard, though, from people who live here or who want to come here to work is that they have quality of life issues when picking mostly a rural community or communities. They want nice parks and nice sidewalks and smooth roads. We worked on sending our local government some money to address those issues this session. I think it's important we continue to do that. Another thing we can do is continue to work on education reform. We want our students here now to be able to tailor their education and have those options to learn the way they want so that they can start preparing for the jobs that they want that are here. So they don't have to go somewhere else to learn how to do it and may not end up returning. Those are some things we can work on this next session that will really help with workforce development.
Great question, and once again, childcare and housing are consistently what I'm hearing, and I think that it's hard for us to put ourselves in the shoes of young families and of the workforce. And I don't know how many of you, if you have children, how old your children are now, and how many of you can remember back those first 5 years of their life and how hard it was to try to figure out childcare. And now it's much, much more challenging. So I share those two things, and when I talk to folks in schools, teachers can't afford, paraprofessionals cannot afford to live in those communities, just as we spoke. And so schools are building homes for teachers. They're building apartment complexes. I just talked to a superintendent 2 days ago who's working on a little mini apartment complex, 6 units for teachers, because they're short. But I also want to bring up apprenticeships. And when I was dean at Missoula College, and the Department of Labor, who's in the House, Department of Labor and Industry has done a tremendous job of working with unions and working with the two-year colleges primarily to build apprenticeships so that you're learning, and I say registered apprenticeships because that is a specific thing, but work-based learning is something we need to do more of. And the grow your own concept, keep people in their towns that they're connected with. Their mom and dad live there, and they can take care of mom and dad and be nearby, and there's part of a child care solution right there, quite frankly. But that work-based learning is a tremendous solution, and our Department of Labor and Industry can continue phenomenal work in increasing those. When I was at Missoula College, we had a total revision of the nursing and healthcare professions, and we had, I think by the end of a 5-year focused effort, we had well over 100 apprenticeships offered throughout the state in the healthcare field. Everything from radiology technologists and surgery technologists and CNAs and RNs and the whole gambit. And labs were in the actual healthcare centers, those critical care centers. So I think there are great ways. And then the last thing I'll leave with, in rural areas, let's let the rural communities figure out the solutions to their problems, because they have brilliant minds too. So I think we often will sit back in Helena and go, oh yeah, let's do this. And so we need to have those relationships built. But thanks, great question.
And can I add some onto that? There's some good points with our two-year institutions and our community colleges. So I want to give a quick shout out to Miles Community College President Ron Slinger. I think he's in here. But he's implemented this program to get high school students really streamlined into the two-year college and learning those career and technical education tracks, so that once they graduate high school, they're ready to go right into the workforce, rather than wait 1, 2, or 4 years to enter in. So it's been very, very valuable. I'd like to see more community colleges and the four-year universities around the state adopt what he's doing. So he's done a really good job. Thank you, Ron.
And let me just add, I gave credit to the Department of Labor and Industry, but I also have to give credit to the Commissioner of Higher Education and that staff, because they have prioritized this as a major issue that is a solution to the problem.
Great. Our next question is over here.
Good morning, Jeff Swingley, Mountain Health Co-op. Medicaid expansion has helped a lot of working Montanans stay healthy and in the workforce. What's the outlook for extending Montana Medicaid expansion?
Representative Lear, I feel like I give you all the hard ones.
So I wasn't here in the 2019 session when Medicaid expansion got passed. This is an issue for me personally that I will have to do a lot of research and talk to a lot of people about it. I personally am a small government conservative in my personal view, and I see, I don't like the government spending huge amounts of money, and with the taxes that's going to ensue on the state of Montana, I know that it helps out working class families, and I guess to me personally, I'm just going to have to get educated on it and learn more about the pros and cons of it and work on it from there.
Senator O'Brien?
Yeah, I appreciate that answer. I do appreciate that answer. I think that, again, when we're talking about the workforce, people will work in places where they can afford to be. And if they are working without health care, it's very scary. Or if they're working with health care that they have a deductible of, thousands and thousands of dollars. That's a role of government, and it goes back to the taxes, and one of my mantras during the legislative session and during the interim is responsible use of taxpayer dollars. And I worked for the former governor, and every day I showed up for work. Is this responsible use of taxpayer dollars? And I'm not pro big government either. I don't want to waste my taxpayer dollars or your taxpayer dollars. And so, is this a good use? And yeah, I think basic health care for people who cannot afford it is a solution. It's a return on investment, because we're going to pay for it now in a minimal amount, or we're going to pay for it later. So, absolutely.
Senator Bogner?
This is going to be the most contentious issue of the next legislative session, and it could go either way. It's going to be close, whether it passes or not. During this legislative session, we had an amendment for the budget to take out funding for Medicaid expansion. And that amendment failed 24-26. So it's going to be close. Things are going to change a little bit with the redistricting in the legislature. This vote is usually on party lines. Minority may pick up a couple seats, but the majority may pick up some members who are more on the fiscally conservative side. So it is going to be very contentious and very close. I don't know how it's going to go. We're going to find out. Sorry, I can't answer your question definitively, but it will be the discussion of the session.
I think the prospects for reauthorizing Medicaid expansion next session are very good. For the last 15 years, there's been sincere really good bipartisan work to shore up Montana's healthcare system, to reduce the uninsured rate, to promote continuity of care and access, and Medicaid expansion was a really smart bipartisan decision. It was sponsored twice by a Republican and had a good number of Republicans joined Democrats in voting for it, and a Democrat governor signed it both times. So it's a bipartisan piece of policy that has improved our healthcare system, helped businesses. I think over 60% of businesses have at least one employee who's on Medicaid, and it's really important. I think that so call me an optimist. No one ever does, by the way. But I actually think, Brandon knows, but I actually think that the prospects are really quite good for reauthorizing Medicaid. I think the challenge for the legislature is actually going to be more in dealing with this administration's execution of Medicaid. I mean, this, we've seen and I'm just going to be really honest with you guys right now, like, I can't believe the way that the Department of Health and Human Services is overseeing the Medicaid program right now. We're kicking people off that we know are going to come right back on. That's an administrative burden that I just can't believe that an administration that is trying to deal with red tape is running the biggest healthcare program in the state that way. I don't know if you opened up the Free Press this morning, but we don't pay our bills. Behavioral health is a public-private partnership. We finance it with public dollars through Medicaid, and we have providers all over the state that are privately run. They're providing that services, and we're not paying them. So they are laying off employees, they're cutting services. One of the best things that happened to our state's behavioral health system was Medicaid expansion. It allowed for a funding stream to help address opioid addiction, to help address all these behavioral health systems, and we are crushing it right now, and there's no need for it. And it's not something to joke about, but I joke that, you know, John Ebel in the paper today is blaming Brandon for the fact that they're not paying their bills. They're blaming a bill that he passed and the governor signed for the reason they're not paying their bills. It's unacceptable, and we should all be saying it's unacceptable. And, you know, this is something that I've spent the better part of my professional career making sure works well, making sure that businesses are supported, making sure that families are supported, making sure the continuity of care is in place. And I think that we have a lot of opportunity, but we need a real partner on the second floor if we're going to do it. So, flame duck, I'm termed. I don't know if you can tell, but I feel the prospects are good, and I feel like the legislature needs to take leadership in some of the administration of the program.
Our next question. Charles has got a remote. There we go. Microphone. That's the word.
Hey, good morning. Thank you all for being here. I'm David Hoffman with Northwestern Energy, also a member of the board of directors of the Chamber. You know, given the pace of the energy transition that we're starting to see, driven in large part by regulations, both existing and newly proposed regulations, court decisions such as the Hill decision, get that elephant in the room out there right now, that threaten really the legacy sort of sources of energy that we use and others use to provide reliable and low-cost energy to businesses across the state. And I'm referring to legacy projects like Colstrip Units 3 and 4, new gas plants that provide both peaking and baseload energy, and even hydroelectric is under fire, existing hydroelectric. What kind of plan would you take back to your caucus to ensure that Montana businesses, both big and small, continue to receive, number one, reliable, number two, low-cost electricity?
Senator O'Brien, you want to start us off?
Well, I appreciate that very complex question, and I don't have a clear plan at this point in time. I think that, you know, what you said, reliable and affordable, is so important. And, you know, I like to put my clothes in the dryer, and I like the dryer to work, and that's, I think, so important. We are, my sense is from constituents across the state are very interested in that being, that affordable piece is very, very important. and finding ways to move toward a direction. You know, people are excited about electric. People are excited about their hybrid cars and working in that direction of cleaner, what we might call cleaner energy. And I don't have a plan there yet.
Senator Bogner?
Montana's the treasure state. We've been blessed with wind and water, coal, natural gas, oil. We should be doing what we can to utilize those resources, to allow for extraction and to make it so that we can get those resources to our people in the most cost-effective way, so that they can realize that when they turn on the dryer or when they turn on the electricity, and that they know it's going to turn on, even when it's 30 below this weekend. We need to be passing legislation that protects that. As you mentioned in your question, I have some major concerns about some possible litigation. Us as a legislature need to be flexing our power as the people's branch to make sure that we're the branch that is making laws. That's our role. Not the ones that are supposed to be interpreting it, but that are making it. So we need to do what we can as a legislature to ensure that that stays our role.
Representative Lear?
Thank you for the question. Just as I said before, this is a property tax issue too. The more we develop our natural resources, the lower our property taxes are going to be. Senator O'Brien hit the nail on the head too. We're going to start seeing a lot more electric cars too, which is going to put another load on our electric system in the state of Montana. And one thing that I think people don't, well, I think they realize it, is that yes, we're running an electric car, but where do we get that electricity from? It's going to be 35 below this weekend. The windmills ain't turning and the sun ain't shining and the solar panels ain't putting out any energy either. Where's that energy coming from? That's coming from natural gas and that's coming from coal. Until we can figure out the technologies of these renewable energies to where they can perform to the standards that we're used to with the coal and with the natural gas, we need to make sure that we are still have them natural resources and are still developing them natural resources to keep these power plants and to keep the citizens and the businesses of the state of Montana keep their lights on. And with this weekend being so cold, I mean, like I just said, I mean, these renewable resources, they're great, and I'm not saying that they don't serve a purpose, but we still need to make sure that we keep what has worked for the last 100 years working, and not allowing the courts to decide for us what they think is best. And I think that's a job for us as the state legislature to decide what's best for our state and to be able to use that. In 2021, when they had the rolling blackouts in Texas because all the solar panels were covered with snow, that was a huge issue in the state of Montana, that we were way colder than they were down here, but they were going to steal our energy to go down there. And so it's a major issue that the legislature, I think, needs to flex its muscle on and say, in Montana, we're gonna demand that we keep our natural resources and we use them responsibly.
Representative Abbott?
Yeah, we're in an economic transition period right now, and I think we need to be honest about the fact that if we aren't proactive and aggressive in taking control of what the future looks like in terms of energy, natural resource development, and new technologies, that's going to be decided for us by other entities, whether it's the courts or it's the federal government. So we have an opportunity right now to work together. I mean, I agree with Ken that the legislature should be very active, and we have, like I said, I'm a generalist, but boy, our caucus had a couple really smart folks, Lori Bishop and Katie Sullivan specifically, who are good actors, good bipartisan actors in this area that really understand that we need everything on the table to start, and we need to recognize that the fear and anxiety for folks who have made their living on something that is narrowing or diminishing is real. And of course you're going to fight for your family, and of course you're going to fight for your community. We have to be honest about that and respect it. But, you know, instead of stepping forward last session, we eliminated the legislative energy plan from the statute altogether. So I hope that the next time y'all are there, that you do act aggressively, and that you are listening to experts, and that we're understanding reality and not just nostalgia, because that's a dangerous place to be when we're looking back. I think it's easy to make decisions based on what we were instead of what we are, and I get it, but it's a way to make some bad decisions for the future, and I think this is going to take all parties, all kinds of experts, to figure our way out of this in a way that protects families and communities, and make sure that we're getting the energy we need in our homes.
Thanks. All right, I think our next question is in the back corner there.
Hey, good morning, and thank you for joining us. I'm Tony Rosanova from Zuda Enterprises and a member of the Montana Chamber Board. I wanted to circle us back to childcare. And the reason I did is that every one of us, as a business owner or member of the chamber, are still struggling with that. And clearly we want to say thank you for the efforts so far. But even in our handout today, we've got statistics that say there are 44,000 spots needed, and we've got 24,000. So the question really goes back to, is this going to be a repeat area of focus for legislature? Because there was work done, but I just don't believe it's been enough for us. And every one of us are still struggling. So what does the legislative body need from us to help move forward to actually solve the problem?
Representative Abbott, you want to get us started?
Sure, I think, I should take this opportunity for the first time in my career to thank Todd and the Chamber for coming in support of our bill. I'm just kidding, but it was nice to see you there. So I agree with you that we did essentially the bare minimum. I'm very proud of the bare minimum that we accomplished. There's no question about it. Alice put so much effort into that, got a lot of help. And what we did was reverse a cut and then help to stabilize the way that we're reimbursing folks that use that scholarship program. So that's not much, honestly. And I think that there are a lot of different models, a lot of different ideas, and a lot of different ways that we can subsidize. I mean, your business is a good example of an exciting model that could be replicated, could be piloted in all sorts of different places. Out east, I don't think it's Sydney. But I mean, you're seeing the business community and local government get together to like heavily subsidize childcare facilities, to use buildings that aren't being used, and to really try to professionalize the folks that are providing care out there. And I think we're going to need a lot of different strategies. We're going to need the private sector to step up and help in terms of ideas, just like Zoot has. And then we're going to need to put our money where our mouths are. On investing in helping out with, just a desert in some areas, and in other areas, just a really under-resourced part of our economic infrastructure.
Senator Brand?
Yeah, thanks. Having worked specifically on this issue for off and on for at least 10 years, I am thrilled that we are now, it feels like we are now getting some traction. And honestly, I think a big part of that was what happened in COVID and people not wanting to go back to work because, and we have this workforce shortage, significant workforce shortage, and much of that we're seeing. I will share that the child care bill came over to the Senate, and I was tagged with carrying it. And I don't know if Senator Fitzpatrick is in the room right now, but I went up to him just before we gavelled in, and I'm like, I don't want to carry this bill because I want it to pass. And if a Democrat carries it, it might not pass. And he's like, it's okay, it's going to pass. We're good. We're good. And I was like truly so honored to carry that bill. And again and again, I think that we get out of we get our kids. My child is a 9th grader. He's actually playing the Capitol High School tonight, basketball. And I don't remember what it was like to have to look for childcare. I forget. I'm way past that in my life, and I think most of us are. And now it's hitting the economy. And that's where it's all different. And I will also say there's this added benefit that when children are kindergarten ready, then our teachers are ready to teach. And if they have high quality childcare, then they get to do that as well. And we can pay a dime now, or it's $1 now. I'm not sure what's on your handout, but we can pay $1 now for high quality childcare for families that can't afford it, or support different opportunities there. We can pay $1 now, or we can pay $7 to $17 when they hit high school and they're in special ed, or they're convicted of a violent crime, or all of the statistics that if you have an at-risk young person who doesn't have high-quality childcare, statistically they're so much more likely to be a very expensive cost to taxpayers. So, I think the momentum is building, and I will share with you that 4 years ago, the last legislative session, there were a number of people who shared with me that moms belong at home with their children. And if they can, and if that's what they want to do, then absolutely. But I think that many families just can't afford that. And single parents can't afford that. So I think that there is a recognition that the workforce actually needs those moms or those dads to get to work. So let's figure out a way to pay for the child care.
I think along with looking at subsidies and tax credits, we also need to look at some of the regulations and maybe some of the burdensome regulations from the state on child care. I think that going through and maybe making it a little bit easier for these licensed daycare facilities to start up would also free up, not free up, but also make it easier for some of these folks that want to start up a daycare to be able to start up one, and that would provide more opportunity also.
I sponsored and passed a child care bill a couple sessions ago. It increased the ratio of children to child care providers. And I never thought, when I first got elected, I never thought I'd work on child care policy. Guy without any children, worried about privacy and geopolitics and wanting to do what we could at state level in terms of national defense policy. And I was reached out by some local child care providers. They said, you're our state senator. We know you've never worked on this before, but we're seeing this issue. We think it could be alleviated if we increase the ratios a little bit. Here's what we think the ratios should be and why. Is this something you can do? And I said, this is why I was elected, to represent people here in my community that have an issue. So I'm going to take it up. I didn't sit on Health and Human Services Committee, but I reached out to the people who did and the legislators who had been working on this issue, and we got the bill passed. So my point there is, if you're seeing a problem like childcare and you think you have a solution, and then you can help your employees get the childcare if they had this policy or that policy, reach out to your local legislator. And if they don't think they can help you, find those legislators that are working on these issues. They'll be willing to help. They want to find a solution. So if you have an idea, reach out. It can end up leading to a bill that gets passed. So I really encourage you to reach out to your legislators.
Just as an aside, we didn't talk about it yesterday. I know you all have busy schedules. But we had a child care panel yesterday, and the Chamber's taking a good look at this as a workforce and infrastructure issue as well. So thank you for your thoughts on that. Our next question comes from the back of the room here.
Hello, John Iverson. I work with the Treasure State Resource Association. I just started with them, and one of the top things I'm hearing about their concern is the Held decision. Of course, it's being appealed to the Supreme Court right now, and we're planning to participate in that as well. But I'm hearing from a lot of people a lot of angst about the broad-reaching impacts of the Held decision, and I was curious if the legislators are talking about that and a possible solution in 2025 if we don't have success in the courts.
I hear this as I travel around my district, as I travel around my state. People are very concerned about this decision, as am I. We don't know what it's going to lead to. I've been talking to a lot of legislators who have the same concerns, talking about what possible solutions are. Don't know what those are yet, but heavy conversations on what needs to happen next legislative, depending on what the decision actually is. So I don't have what the exact solution is right now, but it is being discussed amongst our caucus in the Senate heavily.
Anyone else want to tackle this next?
Sure. I mean, what do I have to lose? No, it's an incredible opportunity for the legislature. It's the bottom line is there's 3 branches of government. That decision was the Supreme Court, making a guidepost, but the legislature gets to come in and respond to that and do our job. And I think, like I said, I think that I'll brag a little bit on Katie and Lori. I think that they're 2 of just about the smartest people on energy in the entire building. And Lori's not going to be there, but Katie will be back. And I think that they'll be a productive, sincere, force in those discussions. And everybody wants a solution that works for their communities and for Montana. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for bipartisanship and forward thinking. And I think the Held decision is an opportunity for the legislature to take itself seriously and move forward with force and aggression.
I'm going to pretty much agree with Ken on this one. I think that
Stop. Everybody stop. It's over.
What? No, I did not say Kim. I said Ken.
So disappointing.
I'm sorry.
It was going to be the first time ever.
I don't know about that. No, I think that, like I said before, I think this is a chance for the legislature to flex its muscle and to voice our opinion and voice our constituents' opinions, and we'll see where the chips lie.
And you can always count on Kim for some good laughs, some entertainment. And unlike Kim, I, quite frankly, since I'm running statewide, have everything to lose here. But I will share this. And I was thinking, okay, don't say this, don't say it the wrong way, say it the right way. But what I will say is, we learned our lesson, boy howdy. Don't ever underestimate the power of our young people. Like, when I was first following it, I think many of us were like, wow, didn't expect this, and then certainly didn't expect the outcome to be where it is. And I think one piece is, and this is in response to the question from Northwestern Energy as well, is I believe that our young people need to have a solid education to understand the complexities. We do not have things that are just simply black and white. And as much as sometimes when we read or learn on the radio, the media, whatever, things seem black and white, and they are not. These things are very complex. So this is an opportunity for us to recognize the power of our Constitution and what our Constitution says and the interpretation of the Constitution, and then what we can do to move forward with it. But I think, so my response is, number one, let's educate our children so that they have a strong understanding of the complexities of all this, but also let's listen to them and respond to them.
I think we've got time for another question here in the back.
Yeah, Gary Weens again. Thanks for letting me ask one more question. So since we're on the topic of energy, as you probably have heard, the Biden administration recently endorsed a secretive agreement that was reached between the states of Oregon and Washington, environmentalists, and 4 Pacific Northwest tribes. And this agreement, if it's executed, will significantly alter the operations of the Columbia River system dams. It will lead to breaching of the 4 lower Snake River dams, and will transfer the authority over fish and wildlife management, decision-making, and funding authority from the federal government to a new entity that would be created, that would consist of states of Washington and Oregon and these 4 Northwest tribes. So getting closer to my question, so Western Montana's electric cooperatives are significantly dependent on this low-cost, carbon-free generation, and they are very concerned that this agreement will lead to changing operations of other dams, including our own Hungry Horse Dam, federal dam here in the Northwest Montana. So my question is, what role do you think the legislature could have in preventing execution of this agreement? And thank you.
Well, I mean, I think that is, so I don't know enough to comment on the details, but, and Ken, maybe you do, but I would say that that's really a question for our federal delegation, and less a question for our state legislature, but I'll kick it to you.
I tend to agree. We, as a legislature, we can put some pressure on our federal delegation to make this a priority. We can do that different ways, but that is one way that the legislature has some sway, I guess, with the federal government and helping prevent specific deals that Montana wasn't able to participate in, and that's through resolutions, things we can do to encourage both the Biden administration and our delegation to push back. I wouldn't say I know enough, or I can't speak intelligently enough to actually what decisions were made without Montana. So I don't want to speak too thoroughly on it, but that's what I would say. We can, reach out to the congressional delegation.
Yeah, this is the first I've heard of this issue, so I don't think I could, speak educatedly on it. And I would agree that this sounds like something that's, needs to be reached out to our federal delegation and maybe do a little bit more research to see if there's some stuff we can do, whether it's resolutions or, maybe there is some policy we can reach out on, and that would fall, to you or other people that are more knowledgeable on this issue to get us legislators up to speed to see if there's somewhere in code that we can strengthen our code to maybe help this problem out or to avert ourselves from a problem.
And I'll share that in case you haven't picked up on this. We had 1,600 bills that went through the legislature that were introduced last session. And as you know, we're all on committees. I'm on agriculture, education, and tax. So you've heard Kim talk about Representative Katie Sullivan, we have our areas of expertise. So not only do you want to build a relationship with your own legislator, but you want to build relationships with people who are on those committees, because we rely heavily on our colleagues, and we have conversation. Mike Lang out of Malta, who's a Republican, we don't see eye to eye on some things, but we're good friends, and we see eye to eye on many things. So we'll have conversations about certain things, and I'll seek information from other people too. But I think that it's important to know that there are people who in the legislature who are well aware of this issue, or that's on their feed. If you want to talk education, great. If you want to talk agriculture, I'm keenly interested. Certainly, let's talk tax, right? And I'm going to listen to what's going on in the energy sector, because like I said before, I love to put my clothes in the dryer. I know ideally I should hang them up and all that, but I put them in the dryer, right? And I know that we need affordable energy. So I encourage you. So that's my takeaway from that comment, or what I can give you from that comment. Thanks.
I think that wraps up our audience questions, and just want to appreciate your intentionality in your responses, as well as your willingness to listen, as well as the goodwill that is apparent among you. And I think that sometimes you can miss that when you read the news, the conversations that are happening among you in the legislature and the community that you build there for the good of Montana. I think we've got a few minutes for some closing remarks if you have anything last to add, and thank you again.
Thank you, and thank you for having us here. And I guess one thing I'd like to touch on, which we just got mentioned, is that it may look on the TV or in the newspapers that we're at each other's throat all the time. And there's plenty of times, though, to where I'll go have a whiskey in Kim's office and just see what they're doing. Like, we may be at each other's throats, but we do work together. I mean, there are common areas that we work together, and sometimes it's a surprise on some of them areas that we work together on. And so looking at the newspaper and on the news and everything like that, it's not always that way, and a lot of times it's never that way. We'll have a heated debate, but at the end of the day, we'll, go share a favorite adult beverage and joke about, maybe not necessarily joke, but have a good discussion about what happened and what we'd like to see changed. So it's not all this hyper partisan. We do. There is a lot of shared ideas, and so it's not all the gunslinging that it looks to be.
I just want to say thank you. It was really an honor to sit here on this panel. So thank you to the Chamber for inviting me, and thank you all for being here. You're a valuable resource. I've had a lot of good conversations over the last day and a half, learning what issues are concerning you, possible solutions. And I really mean it when I say reach out to your local legislator, because this is where I learn all the good ideas. And this turns into legislation, and once it's passed and signed, to changes in our community. So thank you all for lending your ideas to me and talking about what issues are of concern to you. So thank you. If you have any questions or concerns, please come talk to me after. I really enjoy those conversations, so thank you.
Yeah, I mean, ditto. Thanks for having us again. I think it always feels great to be able to come in and represent the caucus and let you know what we're working on, what we're hearing, and how we want to partner with y'all. And yeah, I think that there's a lot of opportunity for bipartisanship, and there'll be even more. Ken mentioned the revamped House districts, but those are going to be a little bit more proportional representation. So things will be like less supermajority-y and a little bit more even. And I'll make sure that whoever's in my office next time has plenty of whiskey for Brandon, But it is we agree on most things. If you look at the way that everyone comes into this work, we all want to deliver for our communities, right? Like, we all are there to be a positive force, and I think that on the vast majority of sort of administrative things and policies that just nip around the edges, we're working together to make the thing work the best that we can. And then there are big political divisive issues where there are ideological differences, and on those we're going to fight. For sure, we're gonna project our values forward and do the best we can, and then at the end of the day, we're gonna come back together like professionals. And I think that went mostly good in the House this time. We got a little, I don't know if you knew, we got a little rocky there, but by and large, I think that everyone's a good actor, everyone wants to deliver, and that's why we're all there.
I'll just wrap up with thank you for being here. I have been told that the number one rule in politics is showing up, and you all are here for eggs and issues, and we certainly do have a lot of issues. But one of my favorite things about Montana, in addition to the way it looks when we drive around the state, is that Montana is a small town, and if when we make mistakes, we need to clean them up and make the relationship better, because we're human beings and we make those mistakes and we learn from them. And I hope that you're able to continue to communicate with us. And I hope that we're able to do better by you, because I do believe we're all here for that concept of prosperity and that concept that every person they just want a job, and they want a roof over their head, and they want to be able to feed their kids. And that's what we're doing. That's what we're trying to figure out here. So thank you for being here, and looking forward to hearing more from you.
Thank you all again. Let's give our legislative leaders a big round of applause. I think I can speak for all of us when we say we hope to continue working with you and wish you the best of luck on your next adventure, whatever that might be. I'll toss it back over to our MC, Todd. Todd's the time.
Good to go. Thank you.
We're going to go behind you here.
Okay. Well, thanks for walking us through that panel, Sheridan. And I think you got a good glimpse in outside of the heat of a legislative session that, to Representative Lear's point, is that there is a lot more camaraderie that goes on than you might pick up in the news. And I think that one of the things that I want to thank this panel is that as a representative of the business community, when we're talking to these folks, we don't always agree eye to eye, but all four of those that were here today have always treated us with respect and want to hear our inputs, even though at the end of the day we might disagree. And so it's been a real privilege to work with all of these legislators and know that they always have an open door and always interested and willing to hear from us. As I was looking around the room, I got to thinking, and some of them have slipped out, but I'm going to acknowledge them anyway. We've got several past chairs of the Montana Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors that are with us. And Matt Jones with Burlington North Santa Fe is here. He was our past chair. Don Cherry with Glacier Bank. Don is here, but he stepped out, I know, to take a call. Richard Miltenberger with Mountain Health Co-op. Was here for a little while. Amy Gramales, where's Amy? She was sitting here. There she is, over here with Crowley Fleck. Bill McGlattery with Town Pump. I want to thank all of you for your service on behalf of the business community and directing the Montana Chamber of Commerce to make sure that we keep our priorities in line. So I also, as I notice around the room, I see that there are a lot of golfers here. So can those of you that participate in our annual Governor's Cup golf tournament please raise your hand? Great. So I want to tell you that for those of you that didn't raise your hand, and you may not be golfers, that we've added something new to the Governor's Cup golf tournament this year. And it's a clay target shooting tournament. So if you're not a golfer, but you like to hear things go bang, we've got just the event for you. And we're going to model it after our Governor's Cup golf tournament. If you register for our clay target shooting tournament, that'll get you into the opening reception, which is a must attend. I think last year we had somewhere close to 700 people in attendance for our opening reception on Thursday night. Golf kicks off at 8 o'clock in the morning on Friday. For those of you that sign up for the clay target piece, we're going to send you in a bus down to Polson at 8 o'clock on Friday, where you can participate in clay target shooting down there. We'll have you back into the Kalispell Flathead area in time so that you can join golf teams that are meeting around the Flathead Valley for dinner that evening. And we think this is the first year, it's not, I don't think, this is the first year we've done this. We think it's an exciting new addition that opens up this great networking opportunity to more individuals. So, if you are interested in learning a little bit more details, we have brought Kerry Hegerberg on board to lead that effort. And I don't know if Kerry's in the room right now, but where is he at? There he is. Kerry's in the back there. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about this new event that we just added, Talk to Carrie, and I want to thank you, Carrie, for taking this on. This is something that's been a passion for him for a long time. He's not a golfer. He is a big shooter, and he said, can you do something for us that aren't golfers? And I said, you know what, Carrie, you do something for the non-golfers. And so Carrie's leading this for us, so thank you, Carrie, for doing it. So talk to Carrie at any point as we kick this thing off this year for the first time. So we're going to take a nice long break now, come back at 10 o'clock. Thank you again for being here. We've got a good rest of the morning. We're going to conclude with the governor at noon.